The city of Mayfield had long been known for its charm, tree-lined streets, historic landmarks, and friendly neighbors. But beneath the surface lay a tangled web of corruption, one that Police Chief Evelyn Harper had been quietly investigating for months. It began with whispers, a local businessman arrested for fraud who claimed he was just a scapegoat, a string of city contracts mysteriously awarded to companies with no track record, and untraceable funds funneling through government accounts. At the center of it all was Senator Gregory Caldwell, a polished politician who portrayed himself as Mayfield's savior while using his power for personal gain. Chief Harper was no stranger to challenges, but this felt different. Her instincts told her that uncovering the truth about Caldwell would not only shake the city's foundations, but also put her life at risk. Every lead she followed was met with dead ends or, coincidentally, disappeared witnesses. Things escalated when Harper's trusted detective, Sam Ruiz, found a crucial piece of evidence, a ledger buried in a recently foreclosed property tied to Caldwell's name. The document detailed millions of dollars in bribes, laundering schemes, and connections to criminal enterprises. But the moment Ruiz informed Harper of his findings, he was targeted. His car was run off the road late one night, leaving him in critical condition. Harper knew she had no time to waste. Caldwell's influence reached far and wide, and with Ruiz incapacitated, she could only trust herself. That's when she decided to bring the fight into the light. Harper arranged a press conference at City Hall, inviting the media, the public, and city officials. She planned to expose the truth, but Caldwell, ever the manipulative tactician, wasn't going to sit idly by. Hours before the press conference, Harper received a chilling message. "You've seen what I'm capable of. Step down, or I'll make sure you don't walk out of this alive." Despite the threat, Harper's resolve only hardened. She knew that standing up to Caldwell might be the last thing she ever did, but it would be worth it to free Mayfield from his grip. As the clock ticked closer to the press conference, the weight of the confrontation loomed heavy over the city. And so, with evidence in hand and the eyes of Mayfield upon her, Chief Harper prepared to confront Senator Caldwell head-on. The room descended into chaos. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to outright gasps. Veronica's perfectly manicured fingers dug into Alexander's arm as she hissed, "What is she talking about?" Alexander's face had gone pale. His throat was dry, and the confident persona he wore like armor crumbled in the face of Emily's declaration. He took an involuntary step forward, his eyes locked on Ben. The resemblance was undeniable. The boy could have been his mirror at that age. "Emily," Alexander began, his voice strained. "This is impossible, is it?" Emily replied, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You told me once that we were forever, that nothing could come between us. But when your company took off, you left me behind to chase your dreams. Did you ever wonder what you left behind?" Veronica stepped forward, her face a mask of fury. "You need to explain yourself, Alex."
Now.
"Veronica, Alexander stammered, but he couldn't find the words. His mind raced back to the days when he and Emily had been inseparable. She had been there through every failure, every sleepless night of building his company. But when the success came, he had convinced himself that the relationship would only hold him back. He had walked away, cutting ties cleanly, or so he thought. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alexander finally asked, his voice low. "I tried," Emily replied. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with years of pain resurfacing. "I called. I wrote letters. But you were too busy building your empire, too busy to look back." The tension in the room was palpable. Ben, sensing the adult's emotions, clung closer to Emily. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "He's not here to disrupt your life," Emily continued. "But he deserves to know where he came from. And you deserve to know the truth. no matter how much you might want to run from it. Alex, is this true? Veronica demanded, her voice laced with betrayal. Did you know about this? I didn't know, Alexander replied, his voice cracking under the weight of his confession. I swear I didn't know. Ben finally spoke, his small voice cutting through the tension. Are you my dad? Alexander knelt down, his eyes filled with conflicting emotions. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily crouched beside Ben. It's okay, sweetheart, she said softly. We didn't come here to hurt anyone. But you needed to meet him, and he needed to meet you. Alexander stood, his jaw tightening. We need to talk. Alone, he said, gesturing toward a side door. Emily hesitated, then nodded. She took Ben's hand and led him out of the room, leaving a stunned Veronica and a ballroom full of murmuring guests in their wake. As the door closed behind them, Alexander turned to Emily. Why now? After all this time? Because he kept asking about his father, Emily replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. And because you deserve the chance to meet your son. Whether you take it or not is up to you. Alexander's eyes darted to Ben, who looked up at him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The boy's gaze pierced him more than any accusation could. What do you want from me, Emily? Alexander asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Emily squared her shoulders, her eyes unwavering. I don't want your money, Alex. I want you to decide what kind of man you are, because that's the man Ben will either look up to or resent. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The small room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Alexander stood by the window, staring out into the city skyline, the weight of Emily's words hanging over him like a storm cloud. Ben was sitting on a nearby chair, playing with a toy car, but his eyes were occasionally drifting to Alexander. Every so often, the boy would glance up at him as though trying to piece together what the man in front of him meant to him. Emily was silent, her gaze never leaving Alexander as she leaned against the wall. She wasn't angry anymore, not like before. Now it was more a quiet resolve. She had done what she needed to do, and the rest was up to him. Alexander's voice broke the silence. I don't know what to say, he admitted, turning to face her. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something raw. I've spent my whole life building walls around my past, around everything that didn't fit the person I became. I convinced myself that I didn't need anything else. But now everything's changed, Emily finished for him. She wasn't asking for an apology, not yet. You can either keep running from this, or you can face it. There was a long pause before Alexander slowly sat down across from Ben, his eyes meeting the boy's curious gaze. The boy's features were a mirror image of his own. The same mischievous glint in his eyes. The same curve to his lips. The same way he looked at the world with innocent wonder, despite the weight of unspoken questions. Then, Alexander began, his voice softer than before. I'm sorry. I didn't know about you. But I'm here now. I want to get to know you. If you'll let me. Ben looked up at Emily, as if seeking her approval. She smiled faintly and nodded. The boy seemed to process this, his small face lighting up with a mixture of hope and hesitation. I want to know you too, Ben said in a soft, tentative voice. But why didn't you come before? The question stung, but Alexander didn't look away. I was wrong, he admitted. I was selfish, and I let things get in the way. But that's no excuse. I can't change the past, but I can be here now. Emily watched the exchange, her arms crossed. She could see the struggle in Alexander's eyes. The man who had once been her everything, the one she had loved deeply, now battling with a painful reality. But there was something else there, too. The small flicker of someone trying to step up. Alexander turned back to her, a mix of gratitude and apology in his expression. Thank you for bringing him here, for giving me this chance. Emily nodded, the edge in her voice gone. You don't have to thank me. Ben deserves a father, not just a man who showed up when it was convenient. The words hung in the air, and Alexander finally understood. It wasn't about him fixing everything. It wasn't about making up for lost time. It was about doing the right thing now. Well, he said after a long pause, forcing a smile, I guess it's a good thing that I'm a quick learner. Emily raised an eyebrow. You better be. Before Alexander could say another word, the door opened, and Veronica stepped inside. Her eyes were fiery, her emotions barely contained. Alex, this is insane, she spat. You're letting this woman and her child destroy everything we've worked for? Alexander stood, his voice steady now. Veronica, I'm done running. This is Ben. My son. And I'm not going to ignore that anymore. Veronica recoiled, her face reddening with frustration. You can't be serious. This is a mistake. Emily stood up, her hand on Ben's shoulder. It's not a mistake, Veronica. It's the truth. Veronica opened her mouth to retort, but Alexander raised a hand. Enough, he said firmly. You wanted this wedding, Veronica. But I can't live a lie anymore. I'm not the man I was before. There was a long silence as Veronica processed his words. Then, with a huff, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving the three of them alone. Alexander turned back to Emily and Ben. I know this won't fix everything. I can't promise you all the answers right now.
But I want to try.
I want to be in Ben's life. And if you'll let me, I want to be a part of yours too. Emily regarded him silently, her face unreadable. After a moment, she nodded. We'll take it one step at a time, Alex. But you have to mean it. He smiled, genuine for the first time in a long while. I do. Ben looked up at them both and smiled too, a small but hopeful smile. And in that moment, as the chaos of the wedding faded away, a new beginning began to take root, one that would rewrite the course of their lives forever. The end.